here to do a meeting on infrastructure with Democrats, not really thinking they wanted to do infrastructure or anything else other than investigate. And I just saw that Nancy Pelosi, just before our meeting, made a statement that we believe that the President of the United States is engaged in a cover-up. Well, it turns out I'm the most, and I think most of you would agree to this, I'm the most transparent president probably in the history of this country. We have given on a witch hunt, on a hoax. The whole thing with Russia was a hoax as it relates to the Trump administration and myself. It was a total, horrible thing that happened to our country. It hurt us in so many ways. Despite that, we're setting records with the economy, with jobs, with the most people employed today that we've ever had in the history of our country. We have the best unemployment numbers that we've had in the history of our country, in some cases 51 years, but generally in the history of our country. Companies are moving back in. Things are going well. And I said, let's have the meeting on infrastructure. We'll get that done easily. That's one of the easy ones. And instead of walking in happily into a meeting, I walk in to look at people that had just said that I was doing a cover-up. I don't do cover-ups. You people know that probably better than anybody. And I was just looking at a list of some of the things that we just did. More than 2,500 subpoenas qualified for. And I let everybody talk. I let the White House counsel speak for 30 hours. 30 hours. I have 19 special counsel lawyers, 40 FBI agents. I said, open it all up. Let them have whatever they want. Nearly 500 search warrants. Think of that, a search warrant. Did you ever see a search warrant before? Neither did I. This was over 500 search warrants. And of the 19 people that were heading up this investigation, or whatever you want to call it, with Bob Mueller, they were contributors to the Democrat Party, most of them, and to Hillary Clinton. They hated President Trump. They hated him with a passion. They went to her big party after the election that turned out to be a wake. Not a party, it was a wake. And they were very angry. These are the people that after 2 years and $40 million or $35 million, it'll end up being a lot more than that by the time all the bills are paid. This is what happened. No collusion, no obstruction, no nothing. They issued 50 orders authorizing use of pen registers. Think of that, though, 500 witnesses. And then I have Nancy Pelosi go out and say that the President of the United States engaged in a cover-up. Now, we've had a House investigation. We have Senate investigations. We have investigations like nobody's ever had before, and we did nothing wrong. They would have loved to have said we colluded. They would have loved it. These people were out to get us. The Republican Party and President Trump. They were out to get us. This was a one-sided, horrible thing. The bottom line is they said there's no collusion with Russia. You heard so much talk about phone calls that my son made to me from this meeting that was set up by GPS Fusion, it looks like, which is the other side for those that don't know. And for a year, I heard about phone calls went to a special number, unauthorized. And it would have been my son, Don, who's a good young man, who's gone through hell. And they were calls that must have been made by him before and after the meeting, 3 calls. After massive study and work, they actually found who made the calls. One was a friend of ours, a real estate developer. Great guy, most of you know him, nice guy, loves our country. And the other one was the head of NASCAR, 2 of them. So of the 3 calls that were so horrible that he had a meeting and he called me, and then he had the meeting after, and he made 2 more calls. And they were written about like this little lines, couple of lines. Nobody wanted to admit it. Even last night, we had a great election. I went there on Monday. We had an election for Fred Keller. It was a 50-50 shot, and he won in a landslide. We went and we did a rally. Hardly mentioned today, and yet if he lost, it would have been the biggest story in the country, even bigger than this witch hunt stuff that you guys keep writing about. So here's the bottom line. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. We've been doing this since I've been president, and actually, the crime was committed on the other side. We'll see how that all turns out. I hope it turns out well, but to my way of thinking, and I know a lot of you agree with me, the crime was committed on the other side. This whole thing was a takedown attempt at the President of the United States. And honestly, you ought to be ashamed of yourselves for the way you report it so dishonestly. Not all of you, but many of you. The way you report it. So I've said from the beginning, right from the beginning, that you probably can't go down 2 tracks. You can go down the investigation track, and you can go down the investment track, or the track of let's get things done for the American people. I love the American people. Drug prices are coming down, first time in 51 years because of my administration, but we can get them down way lower working with the Democrats. We can solve the problem on the border in 15 minutes if the Democrats would give us a few votes. So I just wanted to let you know that I walked into the room and I told Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, I want to do infrastructure. I want to do it more than you want to do it. I'd be really good at that. That's what I do. But you know what? You can't do it under these circumstances. So get these phony investigations over with. The Wall Street Journal just wrote today, just a little while ago I saw it. Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. This is Wall Street Journal editorial today. Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. His copious report, copious, 434 pages. Now they want to interview all of the same people again. They want to interview Jerry Nadler, who's been an enemy of mine for many years. He fought me in New York, unsuccessfully, by the way. I've had great success against Jerry. But he was representing Manhattan, and he would fight me all the time on the West Side Railroad yards, many times, very unsuccessfully. He failed. I come to Washington, I become president, and I said, oh no, I have Jerry Nadler again? So, Wall Street Journal, Mr. Mueller wasn't obstructed in any way. His copious report was released for all to see, and there was no collusion. This is the Wall Street Journal. And there was no collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign. That's it. But they want to make this a big deal. Whether or not they carry the big I word out, I can't imagine that, but they probably would because they do whatever they have to do. I'll tell you, there's a danger here. If someday a Democrat becomes president and you have a Republican House, they can impeach him for any reason, or her. Any reason. We can't allow that to happen. We can't allow it to happen. So when you look at all of the transparency, when you look at all I've done, and I will tell you, my lawyers say, you don't have to do this. You can use presidential privilege. You don't have to let your lawyers and all of your staff testify. You can use presidential privilege, sir. Would you recommend it? Well, you can be transparent or you can be tight. If you've done nothing wrong, being transparent is better. So I said, I did nothing wrong. Let's be transparent. So that's what you have, all of these things. Look at that, all of these things, 500 witnesses that I allowed to testify. It's a disgrace. So when they get everything done, I'm all set to let's get infrastructure, let's get drug prices down. In the meantime, we're doing tremendous work without them. We're doing tremendous executive orders, a lot of work. We've had a great success, most successful economy perhaps in our country's history. We've cut regulations at a level that nobody else has cut them before, the largest tax cut in the history of the country. So we're doing a lot of work. Steve, yeah.
Pelosi give you any assurances that the House won't
this
move
was
toward
very sad, because this meeting was set up a number of days ago at 11 o'clock. All of a sudden, I hear last night they're going to have a meeting right before this meeting to talk about the I word. The I word. Can you imagine? I don't speak to Russians about campaigns. When I went to Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, I don't say, oh, let's call Russia. Maybe they can. It's a hoax. The greatest hoax in history. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you view Congress as a co-equal branch of government, and do you respect their power of oversight?
I respect the courts. I respect Congress. I respect right here where we're standing. But what they've done is abuse. This is investigation number 4 on the same thing, probably 5. And it really started, I think, pretty much from the time we came down the escalator in Trump Tower. So I say to you that we're going to get everything done. We're doing a lot without them. Let them play their games. We're going to go down one track at a time. Let them finish up, and we'll be all set. Thank you, everybody.
Have you read the full Mueller report? Mr. President, have you read the Mueller report?
Wow. What you just saw was very important, and we need to get into this. Because first off, we can see how well Infrastructure Week is going this time around. But secondly, the President of the United States just took to the Rose Garden. This was not an event that was scheduled. That's important to note. He took to the Rose Garden to say that he is not going to be working, it sounds like, on anything until Democrats in the House finish up, wrap up, end their investigations into the President of the United States. Much to discuss. Let me bring in right now first CNN's senior Washington correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. Jeff, this day took a very big turn just now.
Well, Kate, it certainly did, and you can tell the president was doing a premeditated Rose Garden strategy here. You couldn't see it on screen, but in the Rose Garden, he had a printed placard of the cost of the Mueller investigation with big words saying no collusion, no obstruction. So this was a planned ambush, if you will, of that infrastructure meeting that Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer were going to the White House to do. So the president clearly, his state of mind, just validating what we hear from his advisors and others, that he is indeed consumed by this investigation. And it's important to point out, Kate, this comes one day after Hope Hicks was given a subpoena. Hope Hicks is, of course, his former longtime aide who now works in Los Angeles, but he considers her like family. That has always been a red line that he didn't want to cross. So that is the president's state of mind here going into this. And Kate, it says one thing. Not one single issue will get done in Washington, the president said right there, until the Mueller probe is ending. So these are loggerheads. We've never seen anything like this before. The Rose Garden used like that, Kate.
Absolutely. Well, let's go back to the Rose Garden. CNN's Caitlin Collins is there. She was there for this event. Caitlin, this is a very important marker. The president's saying that there will be no negotiating on anything with regard to any kind of policy unless and until they wrap up their investigations into him.
Which Democrats have showed no sign of doing, of wrapping up those investigations. And actually, they've only grown more infuriated as the White House has denied them from having testimony from people who either currently work here or worked here before, or even document production. But the president just made clear, he said he is not going to be able to work with Democrats as long as they are investigating him. That's a threat the president first made during his State of the Union address, but today he followed through on it because we saw Democrats just minutes before reporters were called here into the Rose Garden at the last minute arriving at the White House. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Steny Hoyer. We saw a group of Democratic leaders coming to the White House for what they thought was a meeting to talk about funding that $2 trillion infrastructure plan they agreed to. And instead, the president walked out here to the Rose Garden and made his anger clear. And Kate, what he was the most infuriated about, the president said, was Nancy Pelosi's comment just about an hour ago that she believed the president is engaged in a cover-up. Now, that was the strongest language we've seen from the House Speaker so far in relation to the president's activities, but it came just after she held a meeting with her caucus trying to tamp down talk of impeaching the president. But clearly that was a line too far for the president, and we're told by sources he went into that meeting with Democrats here at the White House for about 5 minutes before coming out here to the Rose Garden at the last minute with a poster on the front of the podium in front of him talking about how much the Mueller investigation cost. You could see his fury. It was evident. He said he does respect Congress as a co-equal branch of government, but Kate, he made clear he is not going to be working with Democrats on any legislative priorities as while they are investigating him. Now, we tried to ask the president, are you daring Democrats to impeach you? Because they say the more that the president stonewalls them, the more their members are inclined toward impeachment. But Kate, that's a question the president did not answer, and instead he turned around and walked back into the Oval Office.
Guys, is Phil Mattingly up on Capitol Hill? I'd like to head over to Capitol Hill and go to Phil Mattingly, because Phil, you have some important reporting about what went down, how this went down in this 5-minute meeting at the White House.
Yeah, Kate, I've been talking to some sources with direct knowledge of what happened in the meeting. Just to kind of take you behind the scenes. Democrats were actually sitting in the room. The president walked into the room, these sources said. He did not shake anybody's hand. He made clear that there were things he wanted to get done with the Congress, both House Democrats and Democrats in the United States Senate, whether it was infrastructure, whether it was the farm bill, whether it was the trade deal. But he said that based on the Speaker Pelosi's comments this morning related to the cover-up, as we talked about earlier, he said there were, quote, something terrible to be accused of that. He then said that there will not be two tracks, as he said publicly. As long as Democrats are investigating, they will not be negotiating on actual policy issues, despite his priorities that he's laid out. He then walked out of the room before Democrats could say anything to him directly. I'm told as he was walking out, Speaker Pelosi said something along the lines of, "I knew you weren't serious about actually negotiating on infrastructure," and that was it. Democrats have left the White House.
That's an important point. He walked out. He made a statement and just walked out. There was no discussion.
Yeah, there was no discussion at all. Democrats were, I think, kind of dumbfounded that that was how he walked in. Again, didn't shake anybody's hands, didn't say hello, just walked in, clearly was ready to say what he had to say, which was, as it currently stands, there will be no negotiations on infrastructure or any other policy issue so long as the investigations are ongoing. And his key issue was twofold, and he talked about it publicly. The idea that Speaker Pelosi said after that 9 a.m. meeting this morning with the House Democratic Caucus that she believes there was a cover-up and that the 9 a.m. meeting existed at all. He said that was a terrible thing that was said. You heard his rationale publicly as to why he believes that, and he walked out before anybody was able to say anything at all. Democrats now on their way back to Capitol Hill, where we expect to hear from them shortly.
It's really amazing that even if both sides say how important infrastructure and moving forward on infrastructure is, that no matter what bad blood is between Democrats and the president, that he's willing to lay down this marker, that he's serious now, that he's not going to do anything until they wrap up investigations. So let's be honest, Phil, there is no sign and no suggestion that that is going to, I mean, it's holding legislation hostage until they finish an investigation.
Yeah, and it's not just infrastructure. And infrastructure was the one bipartisan thing they thought they could get done. There are also things they absolutely have to get done. There is a spending deal that they have to make to forestall over $120 billion in automatic cuts by the start of October. They need to raise the debt ceiling. Negotiators on Congress with White House officials thought they were making progress on that yesterday. That is a legislative issue that they have to figure out. There's a myriad of things that even with all the partisan back and forth, even with the investigations, they thought they could do something. Right now, apparently, they'll be doing nothing.
Nothing is exactly what it seems like right now. Let's get back over to the Rose Garden. Caitlin Collins has some more information for us. Caitlin?
Yeah, Kate, we want to show you this sign. This is the view that reporters came out to out here while we thought the president was having this meeting with Democrats on infrastructure, which White House officials weren't optimistic about, but then we were unexpectedly called out here. White House officials did not tell us why we were coming out here, but Kate, it became clear the minute we entered the Rose Garden, because if you see the podium behind me, it's got the official seal that says President of the United States, and there is a sign in front of it on on White House cardboard that says the Mueller investigation by the numbers. It says there was over $35 million spent on Mueller's investigation, over 2,800 subpoenas issued. It took 675 days, over 500 witnesses, and of course the president's mantra that he repeats so often on Twitter, 18 angry Democrats, and it says no collusion and no obstruction. Of course, that's what the president has maintained ever since the Mueller investigation ended, and we're told by sources the president has been so furious about these investigations from Democrats because for so long he thought that once the special counsel's investigation was over, so was all of this. But instead, it only ramped up on Capitol Hill, and now you've seen, as we were noting earlier, not only so many subpoenas and document requests, but also for some of the people that are the closest to the president, including Hope Hicks, who was one of his closest confidants when she was in the White House, and Annie Donaldson. That was Don McGahn's chief of staff, very loyal, a meticulous note taker, which infuriated the president because that is really what painted the most damning portrait when the Mueller report came out. And you could sense the president's anger as soon as he came out here, and his disdain for these Democrats, and especially the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi when she came out here. This is a huge difference from the last meeting we had on infrastructure just 3 weeks ago when Democrats said the investigations didn't come up when they were in the meeting with the president. But clearly that hour-long coverage of Nancy Pelosi's comment that the president is engaged in a cover-up really struck at the heart of him because he came out here, he said, I do not do cover-ups. He said that the reporters would know that better than anyone. And you could really sense the president's anger over that remark. But Kate, the question here going forward is what happens with the president and these investigations? Because we've known he's been angry. We've known that they've stonewalled. They've tried to block what they're going to do. And the president has said their strategy is to ignore all the subpoenas. But the question is, how much does that get ramped up after what we just saw here in the Rose Garden, which was not on the schedule and not planned? I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, but Caitlin, it just seemed like he was lashing out. I mean, that